Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of the ElderPride podcast. In this episode, we celebrate Pride 2023. We invited some of our special friends to come and share in this podcast to be a part of our discussion on what brings you pride today. It's a very special podcast. I hope you enjoy it. And happy Pride, everyone. Welcome to the Elder Pride podcast, everyone. I am so excited about today's podcast. Today, we are celebrating Pride. Pride 2023, if you're counting, but just Pride in general, because Pride is a part of what has gotten the LGBTQ plus community up and over the bridge of no longer accepting this idea that we are less than, no longer accepting this idea that somebody else gets to define and say who we love. And also, I want you to take just a moment to look at the progress that we have made. Take a look at all of the different LGBTQ plus leaders that are elected into office, especially Pete Buttigieg, that we have a Secretary of Transportation that is fully out, is fully being the demonstration that you can have a married partner of the same sex, that you can adopt children, and you can be in a high level government position and no longer be subject to what was feared as blackmail just as recently as 30 years ago. We have made shifts. And as Dr. King says, the arc of justice is long, but it still bends forward towards progress. And so today I am most prideful for the progress that has been made. So much progress has been made in our community. And we are also in a unique situation as elders in the LGBTQ plus community that we tell our stories of what it is that we are prideful for. Because our younger generations, the millennials, the Generation X's, the Generation Z's, and even everyone that comes after that, we've paved the way for many of them to be open and to be free and to proclaim that they're gender fluid, or to proclaim that they're taking a look at being polyamorous, or they're taking a look at really defining who they are as they see themselves in the world. And I want them to know that they can say that out loud because of some of the work that we elders have done to make that happen. I have always been aware of, from the time that I was 22 and 23 years old, being prideful of who I am and those that came before me. And I was reminded as I was preparing for today's podcast, I grew up in East Central Indiana, and I was lucky that I had a community that had a celebrity in town that had been a dancer on the Perry Como show and the Gary Moore show. Mark Ross was one of those, he's like Jack on Will and Grace. There was like no mistaking who he was in the world, but he embraced it. And when he was not performing on television, he had a dance studio in my hometown where hundreds of children came to take tap dancing lessons and modern jazz lessons and that sort of thing at the Mark Ross School of Dance. And so my community back in the 60s had a very open-minded perspective of what it was to be LGBTQ plus. And when I wanted to dance and be in performance art, I was never shunned. I was never bullied. And so I had a sense of self right on from the beginning that I could be whoever I wanted to be in the world. And when I went on to Indiana State University, it was right during that time that the love generation, that started in the late 60s in San Francisco was finally finding its way to the Midwest. And, dorms were becoming integrated and people were opening up clubs on the campus for the LGBTQ plus community. And, yeah, it was small, but they were mighty. But the one thing that existed was prideful respect for the elders. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you've watched a television program called Pose that was on FX for 3 seasons, you got to take a look at this structure that was called the family structure, kind of the chosen family structure. Well, what happened at Indiana State University and what was happening at that time is that there was a series of people that had been shunned or kicked out of their home because they were gay. Well, they were kind of taken care of by elders. Now, those elders being 19, 20, and 21 years of age were taking care of the 15, 16, and 17-year olds because they had been shunned and abandoned by their families. So there was this family structure. Everyone had in my community at Indiana State University what was known as a gay mother. So that gay mother was that person who was already out, who had already experienced some traumas in the world, and you moved through it. You worked together to respect them, and they taught you how to go along. And one of the things that happened with that is that they really stood together. So you could be having a conflict with someone in the gay community, absolutely angry at them in the gay community. But if somebody attacked them, you were expected to go shoulder to shoulder with your other brothers and sisters in the community to be their advocate, to get them out of jail, to raise the bail money, to make sure that they were safe, to visit them in the hospital. You put your disagreements aside and you stayed together for the community. And there were rules, just like there are rules for being in any tribe or any club or any organization. There were these rules that you had to abide by. One of them is that as young people, you would go out on a Friday night in Terre Haute, Indiana, and you would support the gay man that opened the gay bar. And what's that mean? That means that gay bar was nothing fancy. Some folks would call it a dive, but because that guy took the risk to open that bar just on the other side of the railroad tracks, you were expected to go there to support him and to be a part of that community. That was the rule. And you best not be seen sneaking off to Indianapolis or up to Chicago on that Friday night and not going to Bob's Place, which was the name of that bar in Terre Haute. Now, once you went to Bob's Place on a Friday night, once you paid your respects to the elders, all was good. You could move on down the road. But the other thing this community did, because they knew that there were people that had it out for one another's or would be gay baiting or looking to attack someone. If you went to the bar to meet someone, someone to entertain you for the evening or to hook up for that night, there was no Grinder, there was no Hinge, there was no any of the social medias for connecting. You met at the bar. But what you didn't do is you never went home with anyone without others knowing who you had gone home with. And one of the check safes that they put in place is the Denny's restaurant that was on the south side of town. The proprietor, the manager, the night manager of the Denny's restaurant, which at that time was open 24/7, opened up the private dining room in the back. And when the bars closed, all of us young little LGBTQ plus guys and girls went to the dining room. We went to Denny's to have breakfast at 2 in the morning. There would be 30 or 40 people in this back dining room, but you were expected to bring with you anyone you anticipated that you were going to take with you all the way home the rest of that evening. And what would happen? There'd be scrutiny. Somebody come up and tap you on the shoulder and go, don't be going home with him. That's trouble over there. He robbed so and so 2 weeks ago when they met and went home with everyone together. And they would band together, and that person would be asked to leave the restaurant. But it built community, it built a safe place where you could be who you were. And then comes Saturday night. Saturday night, it was like a caravan of cars that went from Terre Haute, Indiana to Indianapolis, Indiana, because that's where stuff was happening. But again, there was a hierarchy built into the system for respecting elders. And one of the things that would happen, there were 2 restaurants in Indianapolis at that time up on Capitol Avenue that were owned by a gay couple. That was the only place you were expected to have dinner. So you would make it a point to go there, have dinner, to put your money into that place, into that couple that had risked their lives to open that restaurant. I'll talk in a minute about what it costs to get liquor. But so you would go there and you go to dinner. Well, many of us wanted to skip that step. We were happy hitting McDonald's on the way over, or stopping by, or knowing that we were going to be having a White Castle in the middle of the night, and therefore we wouldn't, didn't really want to eat. But no, you best not be seen going directly to the discotheque. Now, if you can imagine, the year was 1974, 1975. In downtown Indianapolis was a 3-story discotheque dance club. The first floor was called the Hunt, the second floor was called the Chase, and the third floor was called the Catch. So you get the idea. But each floor had a dance club, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people on each floor. It's where all the young kids wanted to go. They didn't want to go to a restaurant that had a white linen tablecloth and you had to have a salad and an entree and a little dessert, but you did it because you did not want to experience the wrath of your elders for having gone directly to the discotheque. In fact, even the discotheque honored that tradition. They didn't even open till 11 o'clock at night. But there was a stop you had to make before you went to the Hunt. You had to go to a club called the Famous Door. Now, the Famous Door was a drag club that opened on Christmas Eve, 1925 in Indianapolis, Indiana. Now, I know those elders took some big old risk to be opening that door in 1925. And in fact, at that time, the door to get into the club was down the back alley. You had to knock, somebody peeked through a peek hole to let you in. You got in and you were there. And it was the drag performances. Now, at that time, drag looked very much like impersonating Judy Garland, impersonating Patsy Cline, impersonating, the legends of the day, and either lip sync or sing to their tunes. But you honored those women that were the icons of the gay community through drag. But more importantly, we young gays supported those elders that were the drag performers. Now, again, you may not have been into drag. You may not have been wanting any part of that because you wanted to just go dance. But you best not do it. You best not be seen at the Hunt without having been seen at the restaurant and at the Famous Door for the 10 o'clock show. Now, you knew Once the 10 o'clock show was over at 11, oh, look how the time all lined up and everybody went out and made their way over and, and danced until the bars closed at 2 in the morning or 2:30 in the morning. You left, you grabbed your White Castle and you made your way back to Terre Haute. But that was how this chosen family taught young kids how to be there for one another, how to support one another. And in one of the dance clubs, we learned of a story that one of the bartenders and his lover were, you know, tricked into going home with someone one Saturday night after the bar closed. And they were killed and left to die out in the middle of a field, very much like Matthew Shepard. Well, that entire community, when they had the day for the police to gather to go look for their bodies of these guys that had been a bartender at a bar called the Deja Vu, they were overwhelmed that there were hundreds of LGBTQ plus folks that went to join the search. They never dreamed that that many people would even care about these two riffraff kind of guys that had been attacked. So I grew up in a real sense of a respect for elders, and I had a real sense that each of them that came before me taught me to be proud of who I am and whose I am. The MCC was the first church that really was open to understanding that LGBTQ plus folks need a place where they can safely express their spirituality and to bring some sort of understanding. So the MCC Church, the Metropolitan Community Church, was very active in the 70s of providing a safe sanctuary for people to come to and to be a part of. And yeah, it was a little high camp. It was some gay folks putting the stuff on. I'm sure it was some of those same drag queens that were out there on a Saturday night were wearing the vestment robes on a Sunday morning. And, that was just another form of drag. But the truth is, it was really a safe place where those that have been shunned, those that have been marginalized, those that have been separated could kind of come together to figure out who they were, and that there was a community there to embrace them and to make them feel whole and to make them feel okay. It was there. And so they got to really start doing some of that work. And then when we moved on to the mid 80s and the late 80s and the early 90s, the Metropolitan Community Church and the MCC, were right there for our brothers and sisters of my generation who were dealing with HIV and AIDS, of which most didn't make it. Most didn't make it. We have lost tens of thousands of people in our generation to this pandemic, but it was that family structure, that pride in the family, and that pride of being who and whose you are is what got us through it. And so now we are at this time of life where we can look back and see all the road signs that were there to support us. And we can look back and see all those wonderful people that were really a part of our journey of self discovery, our journey of understanding who we are, our journey to find our place in this world where we could answer our calling, be our creative selves, give our gifts. That's what those elders at that time taught us. Now, today, as elders, we have to embrace a whole new technology, a whole new way of being that demonstration, of being that example for those younger than us. We are teaching them through our actions how to get older, how to transcend setbacks, to turn a setback into a setup for something even better, to know that they can survive a broken heart, to know that they can survive getting fired from a job, losing all their money, starting over even again, starting over even again, or even starting over even again. That it's all possible. They'll be okay. They can do that. We maybe protected them a little too much and didn't let them stumble and fall and find their way to put in the correction, but now we still can. And to do so is to remind them that they deserve to be here. There's a lot of folks out in the world right now that are the naysayers that are saying, y'all don't deserve to be here. In fact, you should go away. And that's not just happening here in the United States, that's happening around the world. So we have to be the other voice in the room, and that room happens to be a virtual room. We have to be that voice to let people know, that's not my truth. Not going to happen on my watch. You're not going to pull that book from the library, not in my town. Not if you're going to get my donation to be a Friends of the Library. No, 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 that book gets right back on the shelf. You tell your child not to read that book if you don't want your child to read that book, but you leave that book alone. We've got to speak with that kind of voice. We've got to stand up for the women in our community, that they get to make the medical health choices that they want to make. Nobody should be coming in and getting in between them and their physician and their choice of what they want to make. We're not going to be that kind of society anymore. But unless we speak up, that can creep in. You can look at the creep in. We've got to be the elders that say everybody gets a vote and everybody's vote counts. We've got to be the elders that say inclusion is the only way that we're all going to make it. If we're not inclusive of everyone, if we're not willing to have a conversation with everyone, there's no reason to have any conversation with anyone. So we're called into an action to know that we deserve to be here and that we still have something to say in telling our stories so that others that are behind us know how to transcend a time such as this. We were the generations that were the protesters and those advocating. We were the ones that were saying no to the Vietnam War. We were the ones acting up during the 80s. We already know how to do this, and we can't stop doing it just because we are of an age where, well, it must not make a difference anyway. Yes, it is already making a difference. And because we see the difference that it has made, we see how much more difference there is to make. So we're being called into action. We are being called to stand up and to step out for what we believe in our heart is right. And when we do so, that is the most prideful thing we can do, is to step out, to tell the stories, to talk to people when we're asked, to get involved, to reclaim what others have taken away from us, and to be the advocates for the younger generation so they can be the advocates for those who come after them. So, what I'm asking today to kind of lead us into our roundtable discussion is I'm going to ask Kiki if she will once again read the prayer that we have used throughout this year to get us from where we are to where we want to be. It's called my deservability prayer. But today, when you hear it, I want you to hear it as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, or that you're an ally to the LGBTQ plus community. What does this prayer say to you when it comes to standing in that place today? Kiki?
My life, my way, this is my legacy. My intention is to treat myself with the same love, compassion, empathy, and understanding that I bestow upon others. This is my prayer for my highest and best. I am worthy and I deserve all good, not some, not a little bit, but all good. I now move past all negative, restricting thoughts. I release and I let go of any limitations held by myself. I love myself. I bless myself. And I go beyond my negative opinions and limiting beliefs. I release and let go of any limitations held by my parents, my children, my ancestors, my family, or friends. I love them. I bless them. And I go beyond their negative opinions and limiting beliefs. I am not bound by any of the fears or prejudices of the current society I live in. I no longer identify with limitations of any kind. I take dominion of my life right here, right now. In my mind, I have total freedom. I now move into a new space of consciousness where I am willing to see myself differently. I am willing to create new thoughts about myself and about my life. My new thinking becomes new experiences. I now know and affirm that I am at one with the prospering power of the universe. As such, I now prosper in a number of ways. The totality of possibilities lies before me. I deserve a life, a good life. I deserve love, an abundance of love. I deserve good health. I deserve to live comfortably and to prosper. I deserve joy and happiness. I deserve freedom to be all that I can be. I deserve more than that. I deserve all good. The universe is more than willing to manifest my intention to live my life my way, for my way is God's way. This is my time, my calling, and my legacy. And I accept this abundant life with joy, pleasure, and gratitude, for I am deserving. I accept it. I know it to be true. And so it is.
And so it is. Well, I know I certainly heard that prayer differently today, thinking about what it is to be a member of the LGBTQ plus community, to really see that that prayer is filled with affirmations, filled with testimonies for how I can show up in the world. And so I want you to know that if you don't have a copy of this prayer, we'll post it on our website so that you can download it and have it for yourself. I'm going to invite you to print it out, put it in a place where you see it every day, but not only that you see it every day, that you stop and you read it every day, and that you read it aloud because you're talking to every cell of your body. You're talking to every component of your subconscious and your conscious mind to infuse them with all that you deserve in the world. So, with that, that is our deservability prayer. And I just say thank you for listening to that. Now, let's open it up to our roundtable. Kiki, I'll let you start us off since you did such a beautiful job of reading the prayer today. But what are you standing in pride for on this Gay Pride Month 2023?
Thank you, RJ. I was struck, and this is a prayer that I have printed out, and I have it on my refrigerator in my home so that I can see it, and I read it out loud every day, and I have it so that my son can also see it, or anybody who is in my home in the refrigerator and has access to the refrigerator can see it. And it was good to have your direction about reading this with the intention of what is ours to do, what is mine to do for Pride. And I really took it to heart as I read it, particularly about releasing and letting go of limitations. Um, that's really huge because I think that sometimes I get caught up in negativity, particularly around LGBTQ plus rights, and that's a limitation. So it was great to read it, to have release for limitations, and combined with the deservability portion. And the thing that really struck me this time is the combination of deserving love and abundance of love and deserving good health. Those were the two things that really struck me, for myself personally and in our community, and helping to guide other people to that through the deservability prayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiki. Anyone else at the roundtable today that would like to share about what either my little storytelling might have provoked in you, or a similar experience that you might have had growing up, or that the deservability prayer spoke to you about today? If yes, turn your camera on and unmute and let us know that you'd like to share.
Go ahead, Betty.
Well, the thing that struck me, well, I love the prayer, and there are many, many things from the prayer that I personally am working on. Eliminating negative thoughts, eliminating limitations, finding out who I am as a divine being. Who is the divinity within me? And not only that, but how does it demonstrate in terms of its power, its all-knowing, and its everywhere presence? So I love the prayer. And what I was struck by in your story is your community, because I predate you a bit. And in my growing up years, first of all, it was hard to know why did I love women? There's something wrong with me. And so, second of all, when I got to college and I could read those books, because I grew up my father was minister, grew up in a small town, and they didn't have much of a library. That was just particularly, you're blessed to have that kind of community. And obviously, the give and take in that is the reciprocity of living as we should in community. Humanity says we're part of a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. You know, one of the things that I was reminded of as you were talking about that sense of community, at that time, the gay community had some strange bedfellows, so to speak. And one of the reasons it was hard to have a bar without liquor. And the only people that would sell liquor to a gay bar was certainly not, the liquor distributors. It was the mafia. And so the mafia, it was the underground that would take the risk to sell the liquor to the bar. But that was both, in a sense, the good news and the bad news, because the mafia community, the underground community, was protecting their asset, not the people in the club. They were protecting the bottles on the shelf in the club. So, they were outside the club to make sure that there was no one giving the patrons of the club a hard time for coming and going to the club, not because they cared necessarily about those people, but they had that investment inside that club. And so that was kind of one of the things that we just kind of understood, that in order for that to be safe at that time, especially the famous store that opened in, 1925 in Indianapolis, Indiana, somebody was getting paid off somewhere in order for that to happen. Because what is, I don't know how many years that club was open after I left Indiana, but I know at that time, it was approaching 50, 60, 70 years of existence, in that city. And it was, they had to pay some folks in order to never have been raided in the entire time that they were open. Good stuff. Anyone else that one of our stories spoke to you or came up for you? What are you prideful for today? One of the things that I know as we have really kind of moved through my journey, what I would call my spiritual journey, uh, I have always been appreciative that I've been dropped in to the right place at the right time. I grew up in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Well, in the late 70s, their national convention signed a proclamation that that community of churches at that time would be open and affirming and inclusive of the LGBTQ plus community. And I was proud of them for that. I was proud that they were the denomination and the religious affiliation that married the Lovings. I was appreciative of them that they were one of the first Protestant institutions across the country that ordained women and invited women into the pulpit. And I was reminded of this just this past week when the Southern Baptist Convention voted to kick out churches that had women in the pulpit or women in leadership. It's like, really? Now, the Southern Baptist Convention is now one of the largest Christian organizations in the country. And so it was just fascinating to see, wow, I'm even more proud of this denomination that I grew up, that my grandmother grew up in, and my parents grew up in, and that I grew up in. And I know that many of us in the LGBTQ plus community had to leave the spiritual communities that we grew up in, that we would have been a part of, because at that time you went to the church that your parents went to, you went to the church that your grandparents went to. You didn't question that. That was just who you were. You were Methodist, you were Southern Baptist, you were mainline Protestant and Presbyterian, whatever that might have been. You stuck to that until the baby boomers came along and started questioning everything. But when I started to question everything in my life, one of the things that I was most happy about is that I was looking for a place where I could combine psychology and theology as one expression. And that's how I discovered this faith, this philosophy, this way of living that we call the science of mind philosophy, not as a replacement to my spiritual upbringing, but to complement it, to put a bow on it, to bring some stuff together around it, and to also see that even this sense of spiritual expression is being questioned by some around the country. you know why are the it's to many, they want to just label us a woo-woo cult. And so it is always being called upon to say, we believe that there are many paths to one universal God. You choose yours. I've chosen mine. You choose your path. You take all of the elements of your religious upbringing that mean something to you and make them yours. Adopt them into your life. Let some go, embrace others, make them a part of it, but you get to choose. You are at spiritual choice in your journey. So embrace that. Sandria, share, what are you prideful for today?
Well, I'm proud. I'm prideful that I am able to just be on this podcast, which is the first immediate thing. And I am prideful that this is a vehicle that we get to express. And I'm hoping many more come about. And that uh, that's a long question. We'll take this is a dissertation, so to speak. But I'm going to just say those things for right now. I'm prideful for the fact that me, like any other citizen, can vote, and that I'm allowed to walk. I'm allowed, but by spirit, to walk this planet and to essentially be relatively free. And so I'm prideful that we're moving forward, that folks are moving forward. We can see some advance.
Thank you. Thank you for that. You know, I'm thankful for ElderPride as an entity and as an organization, because I was contacted by someone this week who's doing a documentary on elders in the LGBTQ plus community. And when this person first contacted me, the first question they asked me is, well, now that you're retired, and I laughed. And I said, I don't know what that word means. And he goes, well, didn't you stop working at 65? And I said, no, in many ways, my career just began at 65. You know, the calling of creating this entity known as ElderPride Incorporated didn't even happen until I was 65, 66 years old. And it was starting to find people that are still out there doing stuff and wanting to be engaged in life is the work that we do at ElderPride. You know, it's getting those folks to put down the remote, get up from the recliner, and to get engaged once again in life, in finding things that we can do. I watched a news clip this morning on ABC television where one small community couldn't open their public pool this summer because the young Gen Zs didn't want to accept the money that they were paying the lifeguard to be lifeguards. So this woman who's 67 years old goes, oh, I can do that. And they go, no, 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 no. We need younger people because you've got to be able to pass the CPA, not CPA, the CPR training and the lifeguard training. I said, well, what is it? I did it in 1969. It hasn't changed, has it? And she passed all the tests. She could dive into the pool, and one of the activities she had to participate in is jumping into the deep end of the pool and retrieving a 5-pound rock from the bottom of the pool and bringing it up within a certain amount of time. She did it in half the time. And so what she realized is, you know, we still got stuff to do. People are needing us right now. So she was the demonstration of that there are activities that we can be involved in. And we've got to, as another friend said, keep it moving. You know, we've got to get our 7,000 steps in a day. No matter how we get those 7,000 steps in, we got to get them in, because if we don't get them in, then our body's going to go, oh, you're done? Okay. We'll start shutting some stuff off. We'll start making some other stuff hurt. You know, we've got to be actively engaged in this final quarter of our life. And if you really want to build on that sports analogy, when are all the big games won? They're all won in the last 2 minutes of the game. You know, everybody is there to see what happens in that last few minutes of the game. So I want to empower us to be that demonstration where people are looking at us to say, what are they doing in the last minutes of the game? How are they doing this thing? You know, because we're not talking about aging forward with grace and ease like we do here at ElderPride out in the world. We go right from retirement to hospice care with the literature that's involved. Well, there's a big kahuna of information and time to be spent right in between. And so that's what we're doing here in our commitment to find ways to age forward with grace and ease. Yes, we've got some we got some inside work yet to do. We don't want to leave this earth without handling the things that we need to handle from our life, to forgive those that need to be forgiven, to forgive ourselves for what needs to be forgiven, to put in the correction where we can put in the correction, but most of all, to be the demonstration of how to transcend all this. That, we'll get by. You know, our generation has now survived 2 pandemics. So maybe there's an opportunity that somebody's going to learn something from us by talking about how we did that. We have things to teach. We have places to be engaged. We have songs to sing. We have art to paint. We have stories to write. We have quilts to make. We have flowers to plant. We have gardens to grow. There are things that we are still here to do. But most of all, and this is where I want to bring it back around, what I told you in the beginning of this podcast was the power of community. The power of community. To be looking out for one another. To notice when somebody's missing and to find out why. To reach out to one another. You may not be able to do everything, but here's one of the things that I know to be true. The Spirit will reveal to you what is yours to do in any situation. I'm excited to introduce the War of Art as our Q3 book read for ElderPride. Stephen Pressfield is the author. You may remember him as the author for Bagger Vance, the movie starring Will Smith. But The War of Art is a very special book that allows us to take a look at why we're not achieving the things that we say that we want to achieve in life. The culprit, resistance. So as Q3 unfolds, I hope you will make the War of Art, your summer read for 2023, and let's discuss it. I hope you're enjoying our podcast. And you know what? We have a very special invitation for you. We want you to be a part of a live taping for our Elder Pride podcast. On the last Saturday of each month at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, we will come together for our meeting on Zoom. We record the podcast and we'd love to have you be a part of it. So mark your calendars for the last Saturday in the month and join us for a live taping of the Elder Pride podcast.
Thank you for joining us for today's broadcast. Here at ElderPride, we have multiple classes, events, and mastermind groups to assist you to age forward with grace and ease. At ElderPride, we believe in love, and we believe that love is love is love. Our target demographic are the elders in the LGBTQ+ community and those that love them. If you'd like more information about ElderPride, visit our website at elderprideforme.org. You'll also find us on most social media platforms.